Please watch to the end. Comment and respond to other people's comments.
Troopers have made an arrest in a shooting on I-5 that seriously injured a man last month. And the State Patrol tells us a victim in a separate shooting ended up as their primary suspect in this one. So good evening and thanks for joining us at 10. I'm David Rose.
And I'm Jamie Tompkins. Fox 13's Zach Anders is live with us tonight. Zach, what more are you learning here?
David, Jamie, good evening. Troopers tell me it was a Crime Stoppers tip that pointed them towards this suspect who was at Harborview Medical Center as the victim of a separate shooting. They tell us they don't know how that happened other than they were waiting outside the hospital and ready to make an arrest.
We firmly believe was responsible for this is now in custody.
Last month, this was the scene on I-5 past Kent. The northbound lane shut down for several hours. Troopers say this man, 20-year-old Francisco Castro-Guzman, shot Bryan Dukes, striking him in the head. Dukes' car then crashed into a barrier.
Yeah, it was hard.
Dukes, a father of 3 young kids.
I had a feeling, the public would be able to come forward. I had a lot of faith. Faith in God, faith in all the prayers that we've been receiving that justice would prevail.
Crime Stoppers became involved, which was the ultimate key to directing our detectives in the direction they needed to go. Anytime family members or someone
shot in the face and blind,
is injured or shot at in a way like this, and
however,
has,
Crime Stoppers,
a life-changing,
injury in a case involving
of course,
another man shot in the head. And is now paralyzed.
From being a fitness fanatic to being paralyzed. That is what happened to a local father following a road rage shooting in 2023. Today, the man who pleaded guilty to that shooting was sentenced. Thanks for being with us at 10 o'clock. I'm Steve Solis.
I'm Jessica Janner Castro. Francisco Castro-Guzman will spend the next 10 years in prison. King 5's Madison Wade was inside the courtroom today for the sentencing, where the family of the victim spoke in front of the judge.
They had to move courtrooms last minute because there were so many people there in support of the victim, Bryan Dukes. He was able to speak during the sentencing from his wheelchair. Today, a judge handed down a sentence that the family is calling disappointing.
My father is my
9-year-old King Dukes emotional as he shares what his dad means to him. Unable to speak out loud, his mother shares his statement before the judge.
I know my dad gives me tough love, but it's because he's trying to teach me to be the new man of the house.
His father, Bryan Dukes, is now in a wheelchair, unable to walk and lift anything on his own.
I was shot in the face. The bullet went through my neck. Wish none of it never happened.
The shooting completely changed Bryan's life. This video shows him before the shooting, active with his kids and putting a priority on fitness. Now, he's unable to move. He has a long road ahead of him. His wife shared a message directly to the man responsible.
I will never forgive you. You took more than my husband's mobility, but my children's childhood.
The defendant, Francisco Castro-Guzman, learned his fate after he took a plea deal.
I am sentencing the defendant to 120 months.
It was a disappointing outcome for the Dukes. They hoped Castro-Guzman would be in prison longer.
Even though it didn't go the way we felt, I feel very thankful he's still here, and just that it's kind of done.
And now the focus is on Bryan's physical and mental well-being, focusing on a goal to walk again and continue to show his family his strength through this unimaginable time.
Anything that I can do to help, anything I can do to progress or get just, 1 inch at a time, 1 day at a time, just try to get back.
The judge in this case stayed within the parameters of the plea agreement. Castro-Guzman pleaded guilty on all 3 counts against him, and in turn, 10 years is his sentence. In the newsroom, Madison Wade, King 5 News.
Anger and tears in a Kent courtroom earlier today. Bryan Dukes addressed the man who left him paralyzed after he was shot in the head on I-5 in 2023. Today, that man, Francisco Castro-Guzman, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Good evening, and thanks for joining Fox 13 News at 10. I'm Frankie Thompson.
And I'm Lauren Donovan. Fox 13's Dave Detling was in the courtroom for today's sentencing. And Dave, it was really emotional there.
This sentence nearly 2 years in the making. It hasn't been easy for the Dukes. The family having to readjust to life after that road rage shooting left Bryan Dukes paralyzed from the chest down.
I'm just continuing to do physical therapy at home and then at pushing boundaries in Redmond.
Bryan Dukes is permanently paralyzed. The 38-year-old's injuries are the result of a road rage incident on I-5 almost 2 years ago. He was on his way to work in Seattle when he was involved in a dispute with another driver. Investigators say Francisco Castro-Guzman pulled out a gun and shot Dukes in the head.
1 inch at a time, 1 day at a time, just try to get back.
On Friday, Ryan and his wife Angelica were in court to learn Castro-Guzman's fate after he accepted a guilty plea.
I will never forgive you. You took more than my husband's mobility, but my children's childhood.
Sentenced to 10 years, it's a prison term Angelica and Bryan say isn't enough.
Just disappointed in the justice system again.
Even though it didn't go the way we felt, I feel very thankful he's still here, and just that it's kind of done in a way.
21-year-old Castro-Guzman had an extensive criminal record before shooting Bryan. As for the Dukes, they are still learning to live with Bryan's disability. It isn't easy, but they're paving a path forward.
My family and friends have been there. They've all been in my corner since it's happened.
He's my hero.
And if you're wondering why Castro-Guzman was wearing sunglasses in court, he was shot a month after shooting Bryan Dukes. That shooting left him blind.
Mary, in this case, highlights exactly what's at stake every time we report on one of these road rage shootings. A judge here in Kent just imposed a sentence of 10 years in prison for the shooter, but the victim tells me he'll have to live with the impacts for the rest of his life.
I feel like I'm such a burden to my family now. I can't do anything, really.
Bryan Dukes relies on the support of his family and friends.
Every day I take like 20 different medications just to stay alive.
But he's grateful to be alive after what happened to him nearly 2 years ago.
I relive this day every day in my head.
Bryan and his wife, Angelica, appeared in court as Castro-Guzman learned his sentence after accepting a guilty plea.
You took more than my husband's mobility, but my children's childhood.
It's a prison term that Bryan and Angelica believe isn't enough.
To get this lowball plea just shows a reflection of how he does not want to be held accountable.
Castro-Guzman is 21 years old, but already had an extensive criminal record before shooting Bryan.
Like, how many chances does this guy get to just keep doing the same thing over and over and not being held accountable?
A month after the shooting, Castro-Guzman himself was also shot in the face in another dispute.
Right now, I feel like he's trying to play that card that, he's had a hard life. Who's to say we didn't either?
Bryan, Angelica, and their kids say they are still adjusting to their new reality.
For me, there's no coming back from this. I'm kind of stuck the way I am for the rest of my life.
You saw there in that video, Castro-Guzman had those sunglasses on his face. That's because when he was shot a month after this, he was actually blinded from that shooting. Now, as for the sentence itself, the victim's family tells me they're not satisfied with this. They think 10 years is simply not enough.
Is this the correct sentence?